So hello everybody. I hope everyone is well. As I mentioned in class and I sent an email, I have to go somewhere. I have to go to a conference on a Thursday, so I'll have to miss class, and I apologize for that. However, I said I was going to make a video and for chapter 10, and I just want to do a quick review of chapter 9 here, because there were some important concepts you really should know for you people who missed class on chapter 9. Okay, so there's this whole concept of season firm forecasting, and they show stuff you should have seen in Business 330, and you'll notice how there's an average there's a percent change in sales growth rate. So everyone should remember, how do I get a 10% change here from 2012 to 2013? And what I do is just take the holding period return, right? You subtract the 2 and then divide by the original 20 million. So 2 million divided by 20 million should give you 10%. And you do that for each one. And you'll notice that if you do for 22 million and 23.76 million, you'll get 8%. Subtract the 2 and divide by 22 million. And then basically what they simply do here is take a straight average, if you look carefully, right? 10 and 8 is 18, and then 28, 40 divided by 4 is an average of 10%. Okay? That's one way of looking at things. And then the other way of looking at things is, if you remember expected return, they give you a range of probabilities here of occurrence, right? You see them? 20%, 60%, 20%. Notice how it always adds up to 1. Multiply that by the sales growth rate, and you get 3 components that over here you just simply sum them. So if you add these 3 numbers up, you'll get 10%. Okay, so those are there's 2 concepts here. One is basically to get the holding period return from each year, and then you can get the expected return calculation here. Okay, so everyone should be aware of that. So let me scroll down here. And they have a couple of examples of that, right? Different examples of that. You know, the different numbers. And you can go through this. And they just change some of the growth rates. But the calculation is always the same. Okay? So everyone should be aware of that the calculation is always the same. And there's a couple terms here. And the most important one that we have to know is sustainable growth rates, and we talked about this in class last Thursday, right? And basically, the sustainable growth rate, there's many different versions of the equation, but it all comes down to the same thing. So it starts out with the growth rate being your ending equity. Again, here's like the holding period return minus my beginning equity divided by my beginning equity. And it gives you a change in equity over beginning equity, and they just show it like this. So here's change in equity over beginning equity. Now they tell you, if you remember, the change in equity is net income, and they define here a retention rate, right? How much you're going to retain, how much of the equity you're keeping in-house. And they just show it as NI times RR, all right? Same thing. So delta E over E big is equal to NI over E big. They just replaced delta E over here with this equation, right? NI over RR. And they end up with and they solve this and said that your change in equity over your beginning equity, again, is G. So your growth rate, right, is equal to NI over E big times your retention ratio. So you can see this is really just one equation written many different ways, depending on what information you're given. All right, and again, they show you here, you can show the growth rate, again, in many different ways. You could take a couple ratios here and multiply them by the retention ratio. You see 3 ratios here. And also you can say it's the operating performance times financial policies. And over here, it's return on assets times financial policies, which is this equation. Okay, so the sustainable growth rate is written out in many ways. Okay, and just as a quick review, the sustainable growth rate is a rate at which a firm can grow sales based on the retention of profits in the business. So if they just keep some profits in the business, it's what rate can you continue to grow sales just based on the profits. Sometimes you don't have enough, okay, and of profits, and you got to go out and get more money. And you can see those concepts here. You may need additional funds. You notice that I have this in red. So this is if you don't have enough money from the money internally, and you got to go out and you got to borrow more money. Additional funds needed. So this is the gap remaining by the financial capital needed, and that funded by spontaneously generated funds and retained earnings. Okay, so additional funds needed is a little long equation, and it's a real important you notice because this will be on your final. And basically, they just have let's see, one term here, one term here. There's like 3 terms, okay, and they tell you what each thing stands for, what each symbol stands for. And there's a great calculation example here that they go through this whole calculation, and you should read this chapter real carefully because this will definitely be on your final with this calculation. Okay. All right. So that's so much for chapter 9. I just wanted to review that stuff. I want to run into chapter 10 now. All right. So hello again. I brought up chapter 10. Okay. And chapter 10 is about how do you value early stage ventures, right? And that's real important. And it's really with regard to cash flows, how do you look at cash flows and relate them to your, the value of an early stage venture? So we need to understand both forecasting period and terminal value of cash flows when determining a venture's flow. And I believe here they talk about the brewery company, okay, that they have a brewery they talk about, a microbrewery. All right, so some of these terms should not be new to you. And present value, it was from 330, value today of all future cash flows discounted to the present at the investor's required rate of return. And investors, this is an important statement, right? Investors pay for the future, entrepreneurs pay for the past, right? So, true or false, this is a great true or false question, right? Okay, so if we look here, there's a couple of terms, right? There's what's called an explicit forecast period, all right? And it's the 2 to 10 year period. And a lot of you people should have this on your, your budget, your financial plan that you come up with, right? Your business plan. So it's a 2 to 10 year period in which the venture's financial statements are explicitly forecast. And what's termed the terminal value here. And after you get past this period, you want to know the value of the company that you've created at the end of your, explicit period. So these red terms are real important. If you see red, as I mentioned many times, you really should have this on your sheet. Okay, so here's the equation for getting the terminal value of just before the end. And this will be your time t's valuation cash flow, and then and this is the year before, right, at t-1, and this is just the Gordon growth model. And here's your discount rate that you would apply, that you would know, and here is your growth rate. So here's that brew pub example I was talking about. We have this brew pub example here, okay? And here's the discounted cash flow done in each year. And here are here's the numbers. So they're not making any money. There's no cash flow, as you notice, the first 3 years. And then year 4, they bring in $2.5 million, right? So the question is, what is the present value at this point of this cash flow? And when using Excel, you find out the company has a present value here of around $5.8 million. Okay. So the question is, what's always the value of my company if I wanted to sell it? Okay, so there's a couple terms here, pre-money valuation and post-money valuation. And this is a present value of a company before any new money comes in. Real simple, right? Pre getting any new money. And post-money valuation is any money coming in that's you injected, right? Plus any money, it's this pre-money plus any new injection of new. So if you get new cash, right? All right, so I think I got about an 11-minute video here, and I'll make a part 2. Okay, I don't want to make them too long for you, so I'll pick up on slide 8 in chapter 10, and I'll make part 2.